In this video, I would like to show you my watch collection because I would like to share it with people who are interested. This is my entire watch collection. I really haven't counted them. There's maybe 50 or 60 watches here. It's a very interesting collection of watches. I have many copies or many versions of the Tiso rock watch. I've got what, 6 of 7 of them? And these were very cool watches produced by Tiso in the early 1980s, and they still produce them, I think. But these are nostalgia pieces. These are pieces from when we were young and we saw them and they were cool, but we couldn't always buy them because they weren't cheap. But now I have lots of them. Now we come to other groups of watches, like true vintage pieces from the early 60s, the early 1950s, or the mid 1950s. These are asymmetrical watches that were like very indicative of the space race in the 1960s. So they had real futuristic design elements like triangles and rocket-shaped faces. They were very cool. Then we come to a really interesting group of watches. Like, let me just pull some out. These ones are very cool because they're gold, but they're what you call gold capped. So if you see in the side, all of them are capped in gold, solid gold, but the cases are usually stainless steel, or they could be chrome, that idea. And this is one of my favorites because it's a great looking watch from the early 1960s. But don't let gold fool you. Just like this one. And let me grab another one here. And these ones are solid gold. And just because they're solid gold doesn't mean that they are the most perfect, wonderful, fantastic watches. I love gold watches, but it's the movement that matters in a watch. And unfortunately, you can't see the movement in these watches. These ones are very cool too. These are from a very old and famous American watchmaker called Bulova. And these are diamond-faced watches. And they were very popular up until, and they're still popular. But don't let the fact that they have diamonds in them and diamonds on the face make them, extremely awesome watches in terms of the movement. The movements were the same for decades. But they have really interesting faces. They have really interesting dials. And these are fun watches as well. Now here are two watches. These ones are very old. These are watches from the 1920s. And they have very interesting cases because they oftentimes in the 1920s, there's so much engraving and filigree around the case. They're very decorative and they really, really catch the light. This one's very interesting because I paid about 100 rubles for this watch 20 years ago, not really knowing what it was, but understanding that it was something interesting. And I found out after cleaning it up, this is one of the first Teso watches ever made in the 1920s. And I bought this in an antique shop in Novosibirsk. And of course the person there had no idea what it was, but I had an idea when I cleaned it up. So you can still find lots of neat things in different parts of the world. This group here, it's from another very common and famous watchmaker in America called Elgin. These watches have been produced, oh my goodness, since the 1880s, 1870s, 1890s. And they're still in production. They still make them. But their cases and their faces are what make them interesting. They're really great examples of 1950s, 1960s design from America. This watch here and this watch here. These are what you call certified chronometers. These are watches that were officially checked for time in different temperatures and different humidities, or when the humidity is high or the humidity is low, to make sure they keep time. It's like they're also very similar in design to Rolexes, and they were designed and made that way to imitate them and look like them. Now this watch I find kind of cool This is from a very famous line of Swiss watches. This one is it's an Exacto, and that was the original company, or one of the companies before it became Rado. And they used to be very famous Swiss watch company. And then we get into, you know, some of my Soviet watches, the old Russian watches, and whether, you know, they are interesting as well. They have different faces, they have different designs, different case sizes, different mechanisms. And in the Soviet Union, they made tens of millions of these watches. It's like, you know, there are lots of famous names like Pilot, Chaika, Lush, lots of names. And they have millions of these vintage watches still sold. And you can get them brand new, you know, from the 1960s and the 1970s. There's another one I forgot about. You know, this is what you call a cushion case or a trench watch. It's very similar in design to watches from World War One. And this one's from the 1920s. It's I think it's rhodium is the case material. And it's like, it's over 110 years old. And it still keeps perfect time. You know, it keeps excellent time. Then you have other ones like this one. And it's mimicking a very famous watch that was featured on the television show Mad Men, I think it was. This is kind of an interesting watch too, because it's the numbers, I think they have radium on them, which makes them glow in the dark. So technically it's radioactive. It's a radioactive watch because it still emits radiation from the dial.
So why you keep it?
Why do I keep them? Well, it's not going to kill me, you know, but it's like, just like that one from the 1920s that I showed earlier. It has the radium, I think it's called radium, and that's what makes the numbers glow in the dark, and it's radioactive.
Is it not phosphorus?
Very cool. No, it's not phosphorus. Phosphorus is a different material. Then we have these ones. This style of watch is one of my favorites. It's like, it's not a full skeleton watch, but it's the watch where you can see the mechanism in the back. The full skeleton watch is where you can see the mechanism on the face, and you see the whole mechanism on the face, just like you see on the back. But this is a really neat design from the mid 1960s, probably around 1963, 64. And they were mass produced, and it keeps wonderful time. So of course, all my watches work. I keep them serviced, and I rotate them. So that concludes this little short on my watches. However, I have collections of many things, and I would like to show them to people who are interested.